All right, let's dive straight into today's explainer and crack open a historical mystery that has literally baffled archaeologists for centuries. For the longest time, the true origins of some of our most foundational human populations have just been a complete black box, totally obscured by time. But today, we're looking at how cutting-edge genetic technology is absolutely rewriting the story of human history. We're moving away from this old idea of an ancient world filled with isolated, static tribes to what we now know is a dynamic, highly interconnected mosaic of ancient migration. And to really see how this works, we're going to focus on a puzzle that has frustrated scholars for over 100 years. So who are we talking about? The Sumerians. These are the people in southern Mesopotamia who basically engineered the operating system for the modern world. I mean, they gave us the first writing system, the wheel, the earliest law codes, and even the whole reason we use a 60-minute hour. But here is the crazy part. Despite being the literal architects of civilization, they left behind a language that doesn't connect to any other known language on Earth. It's just sitting there, completely isolated. You'd think a civilization this foundational would leave a massive, clear ancestral trail, right? But traditional archaeology just hit a brick wall trying to figure out where they actually came from. There's just this massive, glaring contrast between the wild, mythological stories the Sumerians told about themselves and the absolute zero hard physical evidence we have about their actual origins. If you read ancient clay records like the Weld Blundell Prism, which has the Sumerian king list, it literally claims that kingship descended from heaven. It talks about these fictional antediluvian kings like Ululim, who supposedly ruled for tens of thousands of years before some massive flood wiped the slate clean. But when researchers tried to look past the myths to find the true physical roots of these people, they found absolutely nothing. And the main villain here was the climate. Over in the Near East, the brutal heat and humidity just completely shred the DNA molecule until there's nothing usable left. So while the ancient clay tablets talked endlessly, the actual bones were totally silent. For decades, researchers were basically forced to guess. Did the Sumerians sweep in as a pure migrating tribe from mythical places like Dilmun, or maybe the Indus Valley or the Caucasus? We had no idea. This weird, frustrating silence right at the center of human history just sat there, until a huge technological breakthrough in ancient DNA extraction hit around 2010. And that changed the game forever. Here's the breakthrough. Geneticists finally figured out how to pull a genuine, readable signal out of all that degraded noise. And they didn't just do it a little bit, they scaled it up to a mind-boggling degree. A massive study published in Nature used these new extraction techniques to successfully analyze 10,000 previously unstudied ancient genomes from all across Europe and the Middle East. 10,000. By basically industrializing how we process ancient DNA, scientists finally got enough raw data to literally watch human evolution and ancient migrations happening in real time. And this data brought about a massive paradigm shift, led by geneticists like Harvard's David Reich. It proved that human history is not, and never was, a story of pure lineages or isolated groups just staying put. Honestly, the genetic concept of race is completely broken. What the DNA actually shows us is a massive interconnected mosaic of migration and mixing. Literally every single population we look at is just a mixture of other populations. And those populations are mixtures of even earlier ones. We have been moving and blending for millennia. To really wrap our heads around how this interconnected mosaic works, let's look at the spread of early agriculture. For a long time, we didn't know exactly how farming spread out of the Fertile Crescent. But by examining the DNA of early farmers in Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, geneticists spotted these really distinct pulses of migration. So around 10,000 BCE, you only had local hunter-gatherers living there. But fast forward to 8,500 BCE, during the pre-pottery Neolithic, boom, a massive genetic pulse arrives from Mesopotamian migrants. Then, jump to 7,000 BCE in the pottery Neolithic, and a second huge wave of gene flow comes rolling in from Levantine populations down south. And this tells us something super profound. Even our earliest agricultural societies were built entirely on continuous cultural and genetic blending. That first wave of Anatolian farmers didn't just rush in and wipe out the locals. Not at all. They became a hybrid population. They carried the genetics of those local hunter-gatherers, but mixed it with up to 70% Mesopotamian migrant ancestry. So the very foundation of human civilization was built on this continuous blending of ancestry that totally mirrors the geography of West Asia. Okay, which brings us right back to our central mystery. Did the mysterious Sumerians arrive as a single, conquering tribe to replace the locals? For over a century, theorists fully expected to find the distinct genetic signature of an invading people. Everyone thought the Sumerians were this single, unified population who swept in from afar, pushed out whoever was living in the Mesopotamian river valleys, and just built their cities. But when those ancient DNA results finally came back, the picture we got was entirely different from what anyone had guessed. The DNA definitively proved that the Sumerians were never a single migrating tribe, not even close. Instead, they were this incredibly rich, complex fusion of people. Sure, they carried the ancestry of the local Mesopotamian farmers, the descendants of the older Ubaid and Ura cultures, but that was heavily blended with new arrivals from all over. They mixed with populations coming down from the Zagros Highlands in the east, and with groups migrating from the northern Levantine lands. They were a total melting pot, and that is exactly why the question of where the Sumerians came from never had a clean answer. They came from everywhere around them. But hold on. Because the story actually gets even cooler. This ancient mixing wasn't just limited to the neighboring valleys and highlands. Once these civilizations really got established, they started trading, and those globalized trade routes left deeply unexpected genetic footprints incredibly far from home. We can literally see this ancient globalization happening by looking at skeletal remains excavated from the Middle Euphrates Valley, dating right between the early Bronze Age and the late Roman period. When researchers sequenced the mitochondrial DNA from these Middle Euphrates skeletons, they found something absolutely shocking. They discovered the M49 and M65A haplogroups. Now, these are highly specific genetic lineages that strictly originate in the Indian subcontinent. Finding this specific Indian genetic markers right smack in the middle of ancient Mesopotamia raised a massive question. Were these individuals foundational settlers of the region, or were they something else entirely? Well, by screening thousands of modern mitochondrial genomes across India, researchers were able to trace those exact genetic signatures straight back to South India. Specifically to Tamil Nadu, the data strongly points to Tamil merchants. These guys were actively navigating the massive Indo-Roman trade route straight across the Arabian Sea. They were the ones supplying the great Mesopotamian empires with vital resources, like the teakwood that was absolutely essential for ancient shipbuilding, along with pearls, ivory, textiles, and gold. So, no, these Tamil merchants didn't found the Mesopotamian civilization. But because they were so actively engaged in transoceanic trade, they lived, worked, and eventually died in these ancient cities, leaving a permanent genetic signature in the region. I mean, it is absolutely incredible to think about. By tracking microscopic genetic mutations in thousand-year-old bones, we can literally retrace the exact shipping lanes of Indian merchants from millennia ago. And all of this brings us to a really beautiful realization about the ancient world. Ultimately, yes, the Sumerians vanished as a distinct political entity, but their genetic and cultural thread, it never actually broke. As the quote says, they didn't so much die as dissolve into their neighbors, their conquerors, and their heirs. The genetic legacy of these early innovators simply wove itself into the empires that followed, exactly the same way the genes of distant, traveling merchants wove themselves into the local populations. I really hope this explainer has changed how you view our shared human past. We are absolutely not static people tied to single locations. We are the result of thousands of years of travel, trade, and continuous, beautiful blending. And it really leaves you wondering, as ancient DNA technology continues to get better and better, what ancient migrating mysteries are hiding right now in your own DNA? Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe to the Logic Lab 77 for more experience and insights into the incredible science of our world.